Hey, this is Elwin Robinson, and today I'm happy to be joined by Hayley McAlinden, a nutritional therapist who specializes in nutrition, toxicity, and skincare. And the reason we're talking today is to talk about how understanding people's genetics can help a practitioner like Hayley to be able to give more precise and helpful and accurate information to clients, along with all the other tools that she already uses for that. Thank you so much for joining us today, Hayley.
Hello, thank you for having me. Looking forward to this.
Fantastic. So yeah, we decided to do this because you got genetic insights for yourself. I know you've recommended it to a few clients who've used it, and it is a very big system with a huge amount of information. And I understand for a practitioner, you don't have like hours and hours and hours and hours to go through all the results with clients. And so you were asking me about how to help kind of narrow down and like quickly get a snapshot of what the most relevant information is that would be the most helpful for the client. And so I suggested, and you very bravely and generously accepted, that we actually go through your genetic results as a way of like an example of how you would do it. And so that's, I think, the main thing we're going to be doing today.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, to get a snapshot and what to exactly focus on with each thing, because there's so much.
There is, and we were discussing that briefly beforehand. I don't mind if we want to touch on it now. You were saying that a different client that you had used an alternative system to ours, and they found it better in some ways because it was just so much simpler. I don't want to name them I don't want to be negative about anyone, but it was a system where basically they're only evaluating 7 genes, and then they're telling you that those genes are very, very important. And it is way simpler for clients to understand. And it can be helpful as well to some degree. And so, but of course, with us, we are evaluating a hell of a lot more than 7 genes, which means we can give you a hell of a lot more helpful and accurate information. But it's like how to navigate that information, and also as a practitioner, how to do it in a time efficient manner, of course, when you have a lot of clients and stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, she actually only bought the book. She bought a genetic insight book. Well, not a genetic insight book, but the Dirty Genes book.
Okay.
Then she used with your with your test and found that really helpful alongside your test. So she didn't go and get
Okay. So yeah, so she read the book. She's like, oh, there's the 7 genes. They're in our system because almost everything's in our system. And so then, yeah. And that's something that I would like to have a book at some point. That is a plan that helps people kind of navigate it as well. But for now, we've got these training videos. So let's do that. And so just tell us a little bit about yourself briefly, Hayley. Why did you get into nutritional therapy, and why do you do what you do? Maybe tell us a little bit about your...
Because I am not like one of those really robust people that just can sail through life and eat and drink what you want and feel good. Like I've always felt like I don't know whether it's like the runt of the pack. Like my sister's really robust, but I'm really been affected by just normal living life. So if I live like a normal person, I generally feel rubbish. So I have to really support myself with detox and really have an abundance of nutrients and live really clean to feel like happy and healthy and energized. So with all what I've learned, I've then helped other people that are probably in the same boat as me, and the genetics has been quite insightful actually. With
Awesome.
Why that is, yeah.
Yeah, very similar story for me and probably a lot of our listeners, although not all of them are practitioners, but a lot of it, are helping people, and a lot of them got into it because they're, just more sensitive. And as you just said, there is a genetic component to that. Even as you say, your sister or your brother, maybe but I've seen a few siblings' genetic results, side by side. And although there is a significant amount of overlap, there are quite a few notable differences as well possible, so it just shows even if they are 100%, same mother and father, there's still a lot of variation possible. And of course, there are environmental factors as well. But, say I estimate about 40% of people's outcomes are based on genes. So obviously environment and all the rest of it plays a big role. But it just is more of a struggle for some people than others, and different people are blessed in different ways. Some people are blessed with, intelligence or beauty or artistic skill or whatever, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're blessed in every sense when it comes to genes. And some of us are, as you said, not very resilient or robust health-wise.
Yeah, totally. Makes sense. And I think just like if you didn't have the 2 year gap after each child, like my mum got pregnant with me 3 months after my sister, and I don't know if that would change my genetics in any way, but she's definitely more resilient and robust than I am. I know in the Chinese medicine thing, it's quite apparent, with the kidney Jing thing. But with genetics, I don't know if it would affect that very.
It definitely will to some degree, because of course there's this epigenetics. Like, the reason that brothers and sisters are different and even non-identical twins is because, with the sperm and the egg are kind of a snapshot of where the person is now as to which genes are turned off and turned on. And so, for instance, if your mother was depleted in nutrients because she'd just given a lot to a previous sibling, then that could mean that certain genes are turned off or turned on that weren't before, which is a sign of her body struggling, which then would be passed on to the next child. So absolutely, yes, it can make a difference. It can also make a difference in other senses, like she might have less nutrients to give to you or whatever. But yes, it definitely does affect the genes as well. Absolutely.
Interesting, yeah.
Awesome. So shall we get straight into it then?
Sounds good.
Yes. Yeah, this is the first page that you start with. We used to start with this one, which is all reports and high risk. That's probably what you remember. The challenge with that, though, as you found, I think, working with clients, is it's two things. There's an emotional and a mental challenge. The emotional challenge is that we sort by high risk as a default. Now we have other options, maybe since you last looked, Haylie, because it's quite a recent update. You can sort by low risk. So you can have all the green reports of what is good first overall. So you can sort by low risk, but the main thing that I recommend people do straight away, Haylie, is to not ever look through all reports. I always recommend looking through the categories first, because I find with all reports, there's well over 500 reports now, and they're all jumbled together, and it's a bunch of random stuff. It kind of seems like it can be completely overwhelming. So I strongly encourage people to immediately go to these category pages. And if you want, I'll just go through like how I would do it. Let's say I had 5 to 10 minutes before speaking to a client, and I just wanted to review their results to get some idea of the person before I speak to them. How I would do it. Would that be of interest?
That's helpful, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So in my own system, just in a nutshell, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, I talk about the 7 root causes of chronic disease. There's genetic causes, which of course is what all of this is about. But there's also nutritional deficiencies, toxin excesses and issues with detoxification, hormonal and neurochemical imbalances, lifestyle factors, things like sleep and stress, chronic infections, and emotional and psychological well-being. And I find that, especially when someone does have long-term chronic issues that have been unresolved, it's often because there's a whole category or several whole categories that neither them or their practitioner has focused on. And so I kind of will look through the categories which relate to those. And then I'll also look at the 2 or 3 categories which relate to what the client is most interested in. It sounds like for you, you talked about it, maybe it is nutrients and toxicity, but is there anything else that's more, maybe general that would be a category that you're interested in, like allergies or brain health or sleep or anything like that?
You know what, brain health would be quite interesting because my mum had a brain hemorrhage, and so I think that's probably why I also got into all this, because I didn't want that happening to me. She was only 27.
Oh, wow. Okay, absolutely. Well, we could definitely look at brain. I would also look at cardiovascular health, to be honest, for a hemorrhage then. So yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we'll look at those 2 as well. So let's say I that's, one of the things I email people beforehand. I'm not a practitioner like yourself, so I don't send people extensive questionnaires and stuff like that, but I just ask what 2 to 3 areas are you most interested in looking at? So that's something you could maybe include for the genetic review, just so you can kind of have a look at what they're interested in as well. So I kind of look at what I'm interested in, and then I also look at what they're interested in in preparation. So I always look at nutrients, so we can have a little look at that. And I usually do the sorting by high risk because I'm a practitioner, so I'm not freaked out if I see loads of red, so quote unquote bad things, obviously, in a client. I'm just trying to assess it objectively. But if you have a client who is maybe high anxiety, you might not want to show it to them based on high risk. You might want to show no risk or low risk so that it doesn't overwhelm them and they got all these red results right at the top of the page. So when I look at this, obviously I do look at the nutrients a bit, but the first thing I do is I just scroll through and see how many does the person have. And in this case, you've got 14 like high need nutrients. And I would say, based on my experience, that's definitely above average. The least I've ever seen is 2 or 3. The most I've seen is 20-ish, something like that. But 14 is definitely above. I'd say the average is like 7 or 8. And so the first thing I take from that is, this is a person who probably is quite focused on nutrition and food and stuff, but at least if they've got a good intuition, because they can probably sense that there's a lot of nutrients that they need more of than the average person. It's pretty hard to get even the 100% of the RDA of all nutrients from any diet, let alone above the RDA, which is what a person with these increased genetic needs would need in most cases. And then the RDA is, recommended daily allowance by the government. Many people in our field would say that actually a lot of the time it's too low, right? And a person actually needs more than what the government says to be really healthy. So it's really hard to get enough nutrients in general for anyone. But then when you have all of these nutrient needs on top, it can make the person quite focused on nutrition because they're trying to get these nutrients. So that's the first thing. I would definitely focus on nutrients with them on the call when I see there's so many. And then there's important ones. There's iron, there's folate, there's calcium. I mean, every nutrient is important because you're only as strong as the weakest link in the chain. But I don't put as much focus on, I don't know, arachidonic acid or alanine or CoQ10, for instance. But, some of these like calcium, iron, folate, iodine, even tyrosine, I do.
Sorry, does everyone say they need omega-3 in the high risk thing?
Absolutely not. No. It's less. It's the minority. I don't know exactly, but 20% of people, something like that. Absolutely, yeah. No.
Because I stopped having any omega-3s for 7 years after repeats. After seeing this report, I thought I'm going to take them again.
Well, I don't know about taking the supplements, and this is where, if you can possibly afford it, I do recommend testing to find out, because I also have not had any omega-3s of any kind for not as long as you, but 3 years now, 4 years maybe. And I just did a NutrIval test a month ago, and my omega-3 levels have, including DHA, has not gone down at all. So this idea that if you go a few months without omega-3s, you're going to suddenly have a deficiency is not true in my experience. Not just my own. I've seen other people's who, so what I'm saying is I wouldn't be surprised if you tested yours and they're just fine if you were taking them for ages, despite this genetics.
I've had a child and they do rob you of a lot of good.
That's true. I guess what I'd say is test it and ideally get it from food source.
Yeah, I do that, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So nutrients, but we can go through all the nutrients more in a minute. I'm happy to, go through it as much as you want, but just to give you try to be the quick overview. So next I look at toxicity. So I can very quickly look at toxins. We don't have many in there. I think we still only got, we've got 5 now. So the only one that you're predisposed to high levels of is cadmium. So it's not just like a general pattern of having all the toxins be high or anything like that. It's not too bad. But the more important one when it comes to toxins is actually this one, detoxification support. So I look at this one, and again, we'll look at the categories, but kind of just a 100-foot overview, snapshot kind of view. I'm also just looking in to see how many of high-risk reports there are. And you can see in this case, I've got 4, 8, 12, 16, 18. Now, a lot of my clients are like you or me, Hayley, that they're kind of sensitive to environmental toxins and stuff, but certainly not all of them. And I've been surprised when I see people who say just want to lose weight, or they've been maybe they've got heart health issues now because they've been abusing their body for decades, but basically they're not sensitive. I see this, and then often they have only, again, maybe 1, 2, or 3 high risk things in this category. So it's not everyone who has this, and so some of the things are more like a consequence of struggling with detoxification, like brain fog, but constipation is often a cause of detoxification issues for reasons I'm sure you know about. Not getting toxins out quickly enough. But you can see there's actually a lot of things here there's a bunch of genes, methylation genes, detoxification genes, antioxidants, superoxide dismutase, quite a few methylation ones, actually. I think I just saw 3, 4. You got the HLA one, which gives the more likely to have issues with molds, and predisposes a person more to SIRS and stuff like that, which can be a real issue and cause all that kind of sensitivity stuff. So yeah, and then just in terms of correlation, people with your genetics tend to have elevated liver enzymes. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you do have elevated liver enzymes, but it does mean it's more justified to spend the money on testing them, to see if they are elevated. And of course, if they are, it's a sign your liver is seriously struggling, to my mind.
Yeah, I feel very validated looking at this detoxification one. I'm like, I knew it. I'm not a hypochondriac.
That's such a great point you're making. Yes, absolutely. And I've done it. I've been to doctors and even emergency rooms before and had them look at me like, you're just making it up. You're just imagining it. And, maybe in some degree I was, because I was all adrenalized because I was, stressed out about stuff. But there's a real basis for it, right? And as you said, you can see the real basis here for you. Homocysteine would again be something again, if you're my client, I'd be like, I want to test your liver enzymes. I want to test your homocysteine. Those would be the 2 that I would, want to test. And if the person had the money and if they had a lot of the symptoms of it and were very hypersensitive to stuff, I'd probably want to test mycotoxins as well, because you've got the HLA and the mold sensitivity to airborne molds, which is the more important type. So that's, again, 10,000 foot overview snapshot. We can go into it more in a minute if you like.
I've also had a test that shows that I have high cadmium and high phosphate.
Oh, wow.
So there's things that I've really struggled to get down, so that is also very validating.
Absolutely, yeah. I had the same thing, with lead. I had the tendency for high lead, and it was sky high for me, and it took, I'm still in the process, honestly, because lead takes so long to detoxify. But yeah, it's taken a long time to get down. So it's interesting about the cadmium. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then after toxins, I will check hormones usually. So go to hormonal balance. And so with hormones, I do it slightly differently. I definitely count the amount again, and you've got about 12 there, which is slightly above average. But I'm actually more focused on the actual hormones in this case. So I've got low mood there, but I'm going to check emotional balance in a minute, so I'll ignore that for now. I'll look at that there. And so some of these are more symptoms of hormonal imbalance, like painful periods or acne, but I'm mainly kind of focused on the hormones themselves. So I see tendency for low levels of T3, tendency for low levels of T4, tendency for high levels of reverse T3. So it's about 3 out of 6 reports that would indicate hypothyroidism. And so that's not a definite by any means. It's not a certain, like I've seen people with 4 or 5 out of 6. That's more certain to me then. But I'd still say that would be a case for testing thyroid function. And of course, as I'm sure you know, a lot of people with chronic health conditions have suboptimal thyroid function, let's call it that. Hypothyroidism generally is considered a medical condition that only about 2% of the population has, much more women than men. But my understanding is about 30% of the population has suboptimal thyroid function. And, if I saw these genetics, I would say that this person, that might well be them. And because you have a tendency for high reverse T3, I would consider like Wilson's temperature syndrome as well. And like basically encourage the person to get a thermometer and test their temperature and see if they're 37 or see if they're actually quite a lot lower, especially when they're under stress.
Genetic Insights provides cutting-edge, affordable DNA testing, giving you access to over 500 health reports that can help you in 3 key ways. They may be able to resolve your existing health challenges even when nothing else has worked. Using simple lifestyle changes, their reports can help you reduce your risk of developing future health challenges that you may be genetically predisposed to. And they can help you feel more confident in your health by showing you where you are genetically strong. Unlike most other genetic health testing companies, Genetic Insights tests over 83 million different variations in your genes, guaranteeing 99.7% accuracy across all of their DNA reports. They cover almost every aspect of health, including digestive issues, cardiovascular health, weight loss, hormonal and blood sugar balance, as well as nutrient needs, allergies and intolerances, and so much more. Using their system is quick and easy, and reading the reports is simple. If you've done an Ancestry DNA test, you can simply download your raw DNA data, upload it to the Genetic Insights platform, and within a few hours you will have access to genetic reports which give you a risk score for each specific issue and scientifically validated recommendations based on your individual genetic profile. Everything in your reports are based on scientific studies, and there are citation links throughout every report. If you are serious about optimizing your health and wellness and feeling great, then getting access to your Genetic Insights reports may be the most important health investment you will ever make. In the reports, not only will you gain insights into how to overcome existing health challenges and avoid future issues, you'll also discover which types of dietary, lifestyle, and even supplement protocols are best for your unique genetics. To get your unique genetic health reports, go to geneticinsights.co and use code REJUVENATE to get 20% off today. That's geneticinsights.co using coupon code REJUVENATE to get 20% off today.
It's a lot in my family, actually. The thyroid thing just seems to be on my mother's side, all of them. Yeah.
Very interesting. And have you tested it on yourself as well?
Yeah, I think I was hyper when I was younger because I couldn't put on weight. I was so skinny.
That's not necessarily. You probably remember how thin I was when you and I met in person. And I was hypothyroid. So Ray Pete actually talked about this. You mentioned Ray Pete a few minutes ago. Like about 25% of people who are hypothyroid are actually very underweight and can't put on weight. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're hyper. What really matters is the temperature, doing the underarm or oral temperature and seeing what it is.
Yeah, I think definitely under temperature. I've got into the temperature thing for years and can't quite get up to 37.
Okay, but you're close?
Close-ish, 36.5.
Okay, so yeah, it's kind of moderate, it's okay-ish, right? I tend to find once you're on 36.1, 36.2, you're often quite ill, 36.5. For our American friends, what would that be? About 97.5, I think. That's the equivalent of what she's saying there. So yeah, could be optimized, and often it is, it's other things, toxicity and that's keeping you down when it comes to
thing. Saying that obviously you need more iodine, would really help, wouldn't it?
Potentially, although I think I partly cause my hypothyroidism by overdosing on iodine. There is evidence that shows that that too much iodine also creates hypothyroidism, just like too little. And so yes, you have a genetic need for more, but the amount they put in supplements is so much higher than like the amount you'd ever find in food. And sometimes with some things like B12, that's fine, but with iodine, I've learned, from bitter experience that you don't want to overdo it with iodine either. So I would have a very moderate amount of it, or just try and get it from food, to be honest. There was one doctor who I want to interview. I keep mentioning him, but he's treated thousands of patients, and he claims to have successfully cured them of hypothyroidism in the vast majority of cases. And the only thing he does is put them on an iodine restricted diet.
Oh my God, what?
So as far as he's concerned, usually it's too much iodine that's the problem. And I don't think, as I said, from my own personal subjective experience, he's not necessarily wrong. So yeah, like too little iodine absolutely can cause hypothyroidism, goiter, all that, no question, but too much can as well. So you just got to be careful with it.
Iodine was low recently in a test that I did, actually. For the last year, it's been kind of low that I've been trying to get up, so don't know.
Okay. So yeah, maybe for you do actually need it. I'm just saying I wouldn't just recommend it to everyone just because of the genetics, because it can make it worse. But yes, if you need it, then you need it. This is where further testing is always great. These only indicate tendencies of genetics, right? It's always better to test it. And, I know you have a new testing process that you're testing right now, and you don't want to talk about it yet, but maybe in a future episode we can talk about that, because that sounded really interesting. So other hormones, so leptin and testosterone. High testosterone can mean like more assertiveness, more aggressiveness, more higher sex drive in women. But again, that's only if it's actually the case. It's a genetic tendency. And then leptin, higher leptin levels, that indicates a likelihood for leptin resistance, which can mean that the person has a tendency to overeat. So in that case, I might just skip to the weight loss section. This is, again, assuming I never met you or whatever. I'm just imagining you're a client who's I'm booked to speak with in 10 minutes. And I look at that and I'm like, the person has a couple of things, but I don't see any other obvious signs of that this person will be overweight that are significant. So, probably not. But, it might just be a person who sometimes overeats. I don't know if that's true or not. It's possible, but it's not very likely.
No, I'm pretty good with self-control.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's because other factors would outweigh it, right? Like the toxins and stuff like that. You probably feel bad if you eat too much food, I imagine.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, that's good. And yeah, there isn't, as you said, self-control. There's nothing here to indicate that you won't overeat other than the leptin. So yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. Okay, and then just buzzing along quickly still, I might look at sleep, but I said lifestyle factors is my next one in my list there, and for that I would look at I'm interested in stress, so I go to emotional well-being, which also kind of covers category 7. So I don't think I've ever had a client who says that this is in their. Actually, that's not true. I've only had one client who's ever said this is in their top 2 or 3 categories that they want to focus on. Most people don't, but it's super important for most people. And so in this category, we've got a combination of kind of things that cause issues like inflammation. A lot of people are aware these days that inflammation of the brain and endocrine system and stuff is, a root cause. Some people say it's the root cause of psychological issues like depression or whatever. I personally think hypoglycemia is really underestimated as a cause of emotional issues. I think, sure that yes, there may be really, genuine reasons why someone is upset of, all kinds of upset, anxious, sad, angry, whatever. But to me, if someone's had enough sleep and they've eaten recently, they're much less likely to be upset. All other things have been equal, despite their life situation or whatever. And so there's a great study on this with judges that I don't know if you saw this, that they looked at the sentencing given by judges before and after lunch, and they're way harsher before than after lunch. So if you're ever in a sentencing hearing, get your lawyer to delay the sentencing till after lunch if you could possibly manage it.
Yeah, I've struggled with low blood sugar. That's definitely also one of the things that got me into this, because I just couldn't switch on, just trying to even learn at college. I was just like, I just want to go to sleep. It's I think it's quite intertwined with dopamine, isn't it? The low blood sugar thing.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, just ability to pay attention in general. Absolutely. Yeah. Interesting. And so yeah, these 4 at the top, I'd say, are all pretty important. I would likely talk about all of these with the clients. And just generally, not every report has a percentage score, but a lot of them do. I know that these 2 do, for instance, low mood and hypoglycemia. The fact that it's right on the top of the list means that I would guess that this person has a very high chance of it. And so the way I kind of calculate this is important to understand. If you have a very high likelihood of something genetically, and it's something that's quite common, the person probably has it, So, can I ask you, have you had an issue with low mood at any point in your life?
Yeah, that was also depression was also one of the things that catapulted me into really having to do a lot for my health.
Okay.
Yeah, so definitely low mood. That is
Absolutely. And so we can see actually you're in the 80th percentile for this, so it's not super high, but it's still high. It's high enough to obviously, as you said, that you've been suffering for it, because a lot of people do. Is it like 20% of people suffer from depression at some point? So even if you're in the 80th percentile, it still means you're very likely to have had the issue. Whereas something like this, borderline personality, is pretty rare. And it's triggered by like severe abuse and trauma and neglect and stuff like that. And so I mean severe, I know everyone's had some degree of trauma and abuse in their life, but it's a rare thing. And unless you have even if you have a very high score, the chances of having it are still pretty low, basically. So you got to kind of bear that in mind when you look at these reports. Like, if someone has a high chance of having something very common, they probably have it or have had it at some point. But even if someone has a high chance of having something very uncommon, they probably still don't have it, just law of averages, But I do find, there's been a few times, once on an interview that I did on someone else's channel, publicly, again, going through someone's results with them, and I think it might be borderline personality or maybe bipolar. And I said that, you have this genetic risk, but it doesn't seem to me like you actually have it. And they said, no, but my mother did, So that's another thing that maybe, you don't have it, but you can see that it's...
The family line it could have been. I mean, I didn't know my mum personally after she had the brain hemorrhage. So, yeah, I don't really know.
Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. God, it's terrible. Okay. So, yes, useful things to know about your family, maybe that, as you said, you didn't know because you didn't get to know them. Mania sounds bad, but I've actually, some of my favorite clients have that. They tend to be very enthusiastic people who get a lot done, the people with a high chance of mania. I think the risk is just that you can burn yourself out, is more what I find. But yeah, so just to go back to the overview view again, there's quite a few things here. So just like we were saying earlier about, you probably have a tendency to struggle getting your nutrients from food. You probably have a tendency to be sensitive to toxins. You probably struggle to be happy as well, And now that doesn't mean that you're not, but it means that for some people it's effortless, and it's probably not for you. Like, you have to actually work at it.
You've got to do all the things.
Right. Yeah. Me too, for the longest time. And I'd say it's only the last few years, like, as I've really started to optimize things, I just wake up happy for no reason. I don't have to do any meditation. I don't have to do any visualization. I don't have to do any affirmations or this. I'm very happy about that. But I'm also very happy, I think, in retrospect, that I did learn to do all those things. And it's the same with diet. I often say people with quote unquote weak genetics, or as you probably more helpfully call it, less robust genetics, they often have to kind of self-reflect and change their unhealthy habits when they're younger, because they can't get away with it anymore. Whereas if you meet someone, as I sometimes do, who's in their late 40s, 50s or more, who has had all these unhealthy habits all their life, and it's only just starting to catch up with them because they got quote unquote good genes, usually it's too late for them to change their ways by then. I'm not saying, that's not fatalistic. I'm not saying if you're listening to this and you're in that camp, you can't. I'm just saying a lot of time people just don't, like, they get stuck in their ways. So I'm glad that I had these problems early on that made me, assess myself and, be able to change myself, right? As opposed to if you're lucky, you got kind of everything going for you when you're born, but then by the time things start to catch up with you, it's often too late to change. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a blessing being sensitive. It is.
Absolutely. And of course, it's a blessing if you care about other people, because it helps you help others and understand others who are suffering and all of that kind of stuff as well. The one category I don't usually look at is chronic infections, unless the person has specifically come to me asking about that, but there is an infection category, but I usually don't look at it unless it is on their mind, because, what's the point telling them they're at higher risk of stuff? If they generally had issues with infections, I'd also, look at immune system. I'd maybe also just look at sleep. That would be any other category in terms of lifestyle stuff. So anxiety can obviously have an issue with sleep, but you got a couple of things here. sleep apnea, but TMJ, is that something?
Well, I don't know because I had this brace and so my jaw clicked. I'm like, is it the brace or would it have done it anyway?
Okay. Yeah, it's more like it's a correlation with jaw tension, which I'd say the clicking, but yeah, it's hard to say if it's the brace or, yeah.
Going back to like hormones, it's really interesting with the high testosterone because you know the body type. I think you do a different body type and thing. But I'm an adrenal body type where your shoulders are wider than your hips.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So to have high testosterone, that would be my thing to look out for, just like making sure my testosterone's in check. So the fact that it's also on genetics and my body type is that shape to have that is really interesting.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and you don't have estrogen high, which would be the opposite, right? That would be more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very
absolutely.
that would be, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. The categories you said you're interested in brain and cardiovascular. So yeah, let's look at that. And now it's going to sort by high risk again, right? But if this is something you're freaked out about or your client was freaked out about, you could not do it that way. You know, you could start with low risk and you could say, okay, well,
No, that's a bit rubbish, do it that way.
here's the good news. You're not likely to have metabolic syndrome, which is good. Actually, that is good. That's often a determinant for having cardiovascular issues. So, lower risk for insulin resistance, lower risk for obesity, all of that kind of stuff. So that's good. But yeah, if we look at the high risk ones. So yeah, there's definitely some stuff there. 16, 20, 24, 28. Oh my God. Yeah, that is a lot. Yeah. Well, the good news about cardiovascular health is, the bad news about it that they say is it's the silent killer, right? And the reason it's the silent killer is because you can feel totally fine and then suddenly drop dead, right? As very sadly happened to your mother. The good news is if you are testing, it won't creep up on you. So I'm such a big fan of testing, let's say in the vast majority of cases, there's always outlier exceptions. But you have a bunch of things here which would indicate that, you're more likely to have cardiovascular issues, probably inherited from your mother, based on what you told me, right?
Dad's also had some heart attacks, so
Right.
recently.
But the good news is, I would say, unlike the C word that I don't say on the channel because YouTube has an issue with it, which is quite hard to avoid, cardiovascular disease, in my mind, is quite easy to avoid if you are testing regularly. You're on top of these kind of markers. So you have a tendency for high cholesterol, LDL cholesterol. High levels of lipoprotein A, which is related to that LDL cholesterol again. Inflammation of the muscles of the heart specifically, myocarditis. Homocysteine. Homocysteine is a great example. I think I said earlier in the nutritional section that if you were my client, I'd encourage you to test homocysteine. So I'll just double tick that again. Because I'm sure you've heard of homocysteine, right?
Test at the doctors, they just don't think it's important, but obviously you can get private tests. But
yeah, a lot of it I think is cost. It's like I don't think a doctor would argue that insulin is irrelevant either, but they never test it, even though they should, and it's just because it's an expensive test, is my understanding. And homocysteine may be similar. I guess they wouldn't see it that way, but I think that's the kind of incentive system that's in play. Whatever. Maybe I'm just trying to let them off the hook. But anyway, yeah, I would recommend doing homocysteine. It is available easily privately from pretty much all labs, even mainstream labs that do other mainstream results in most cases. And you can get homocysteine down in most cases pretty simply. Often it's just about taking the B vitamins, B2, B6, B9, B12. Sometimes you got to go a little bit further, like taking TMG, creatine, choline, SAMe, or some combination, maybe one of those, maybe a couple. But with basically a few simple nutrients, you can get that homocysteine down if it's elevated. And when you do get that homocysteine down, you've significantly reduced your risk of all kinds of diseases, including cardiovascular disease and Alzheimer's, among others. So, it's so worth testing. It's so worth getting down.
Yeah, I think I will
You're
test
probably
that. I think
Sorry.
you're right. I think I actually will test that. I've been meaning to do it, then I just carry on with life because I feel all right. But
That's the thing about the cardiovascular health, right? You can feel all right, and then you got a severe problem. So yes, I would definitely test that. I would also test the cholesterols. It's again pretty cheap, easily available test. I'm not a believer, as you're probably not, that high cholesterol equals heart disease. It's not as simple as that. But if you do have really high LDL cholesterol, I'm of the opinion that it's actually your body's way of trying to protect your arteries from toxins. That's my theory in a nutshell. But still, even if that's the case, if enough cholesterol and fibrin and calcium and all the rest of it build up in the arteries, that can lead to, a cardiovascular event. So even though I don't think like cholesterol is bad, it's true. It is true that if it's getting really, really high, especially the so-called bad types, it's a sign of a problem that needs addressing. And so I definitely think that it is worth testing. And then also just testing for inflammatory markers like HSCRP, which, erythrocyte sedimentation rate, maybe platelets counts as well, MPV. You got tendency for higher platelets as well. This is not talked about a lot, but they go on endlessly about cholesterol when it comes to heart attacks and stuff. But a lot of the time, it's actually a clot that kind of moves and gets stuck somewhere, and so that is an issue as well. But again, easily resolvable. You can take nattokinase or aspirin if you want to take, which is basically salicylic acid, a plant chemical. So there's kind of natural and natural-ish things that you can take, which are very effective at reducing platelets. But you need to know if the platelets are high.
what test would you do for that? Is it a D- or something?
Just platelet count. And mean platelet volume, those two. Mean platelet volume is a good indicator of inflammation, and then platelet count is an indication of if there are platelets building up that may indicate excessive clotting.
Okay.
And again, bog standard part of a CBC, complete blood count, that even a normal medical doctor would do for you if you went in for a checkup.
Yeah. What I find interesting, sorry to interrupt, I have been on like saturated fats, as in coconut oil, and avoiding seed oils for like 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw on here that saturated fat is not good. 6 months ago, I was like, right, no more coconut oil to cook with and ghee. And I was like, I'm just going to try and do like avocado on the mono unsaturates. So I thought that was actually quite useful. Would you say that comes up for people?
Yes, I have seen that, but I would say more commonly people actually do, they do gravitate to the fuel sources that are better for them. If we look at carbohydrates for you, for instance, that's an interesting one because that's not good or bad. It's just which type are you. So would you say you're someone who gravitates to having more or less carbs, like just naturally, not like if you're listening to Ray Peat or Dr. Berg or someone?
Well, I crave carbs and fats basically.
Okay. I think a lot of people crave carbs and fats, to be honest.
It's a combo that tastes the best.
Yeah, definitely. Although, craving both, I guess that's like just a sign of maybe low energy, right? If you're craving them as they're the primary fuel sources. And yeah, there we go. Predisposed to an intermediate response to carbs. So you're okay with carbs. So it's probably what you actually said, you like both. So as much as I slightly made fun of your answer, it's actually accurate. Like you basically like both. That's great. Yeah, that makes sense. So where were we? With cardiovascular health. So again, I just have going back to, I guess, my original thing of, just quick overview. I would look at that and go, okay, this person is predisposed to these issues, and I would, recommend that they test. Now, actually, funnily enough, one of the things that doesn't show up is high blood pressure. You actually have a tendency for low blood pressure, and then you also have a tendency for Raynaud's, which, again, usually does not go along with high blood pressure. Do you have Raynaud's? Do you have cold fingers sometimes?
I do tend to be on the colder side, but I definitely feel like the low blood pressure is the thing. Like when I get up, sometimes I'm still like dizzy. So that has been, something that I'm always trying to get my potassium and stuff balanced with that. That makes sense.
Okay, yeah, more sodium and perhaps low levels of cortisol. We don't have a low cortisol genetic result, unfortunately. It's only normal or high. Um, but yeah, so that can be like a bit of a lack of adrenal function potentially. Low cortisol and possibly high adrenaline. Um, so yeah, so you do have more than average things that are a challenge, and that hopefully, as you said, it's affirmative because it correlates with exactly what you said at the beginning of the episode, which is that it's more of a struggle for you than other people, like for instance your sister. But the good news is, with the genetic results, so that's the first thing I do is just kind of do an assessment, and then I think to myself, what other further tests would I recommend? I've kind of already done that going through, right? Like, and this is important stuff because, like, for instance, in this category, cardiovascular health, you could literally save someone's life with this, right? Even with nutrient stuff, I remember there's one client who I had who they had a genetic tendency to low B12, and they were showing some of the signs of it, including neurological issues. And I got them to test it, and their B12 was really low. And that's a big deal because not only is every nutrient important, but B12, once you go beyond a certain level of severe deficiency with it, it's kind of impossible to fix it. So we kind of caught it in time. So literally, this can sometimes be life-saving. This can many times, including a few times we've had people on the show, like change their life. Like literally, problems they've had for decades are just resolved because of a simple thing that we find in their genetics. So yeah.
In an ideal world, you'd meet all of your nutritional needs in the form of vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, and more from the foods you eat. However, unless you prepare all of your food at home from scratch using the highest quality ingredients possible, the reality is that most of us need some nutritional support. Most of us need to take supplements if we want to look, feel, and perform at our best on a consistent daily basis. And this is especially true if you have genes that give you an elevated need of certain nutrients. And this is where Feel Younger can help. What I love about Feel Younger is that they offer a huge range of quality supplements and healthcare products formulated and endorsed by Owen Robinson, including must-haves like magnesium glycinate and vitamins B12, D3, and K2. And they do it at affordable prices with free shipping for orders over $50 without ever compromising on quality, purity, or potency. To learn more about how Feel Younger supplements can give your health a boost while supporting this podcast, please visit feelyounger.net and use promo code REJUVENATE to get 20% off your first order. That's promo code REJUVENATE for 20% off your first order at feelyounger.net.
What, that they then go and test and then they correct?
Yes, or some cases they don't even test. Like for instance, if it's a nutrient that's completely harmless, like we had one person on who talked about their experience of glycine, the amino acid. There's a B12 example I just gave. There's someone. There's another person with iron. I told them to test it, but they didn't and took it anyway, and they felt loads better. Like a lot of their chronic health problems went away. So I do recommend testing in most cases, unless it's a nutrient that's harmless, like B12. Yeah, sometimes people ignore me and just take it without testing and feel a lot better.
That's interesting. What about the brain health? What was going to come up on?
Oh yeah, we can look at that. Yeah. Sorry, yeah, you did say that was the other one. So yeah, more higher risk of cognitive decline, which we tend to not use disease words here, but that is kind of like Alzheimer's kind of thing. Inflammation, but again, this is why I started with cardiovascular health, because it's heavily affected by cardiovascular health, and the other one would be blood sugar. So if you're on top of your blood sugar, if you don't have insulin resistance, if you do not have high levels of inflammation, if you do not have high levels of platelets and plaque building up in your blood, your risk of these things is very low, right? So that's like, I tend to focus more on the root causes first. But yeah, if you're not on top of all those things, as most people aren't, especially as they get older, then yeah, you do have a more elevated risk of cognitive decline, cognitive issues. See what else. A need for more choline via this as well. So choline is important for the liver and the brain, and so and if your body struggles with methylation, it struggles to make enough choline. So making sure you get enough choline from food or supplements, I would add that for this person, for you.
And the dopamine thing. So what things show up for the ADHD? Because obviously that's like a big thing these.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be in this category as well. It's this one, attention. Typical likelihood of ADHD. So you don't have that one specifically, but this is like we come at it from more than one angle, So a lot of these are correlative, not causative. So what all this means is, on average, people with your SNPs, your genetic variants, are not any more likely than average to be diagnosed with ADHD. However, if you have low dopamine, you're going to have a lot of the symptoms, which a lot of people would call ADHD, even if you don't have the diagnosis. It's going to be difficult to focus. It's going to be difficult as well also to feel motivated and energized and stuff like that. And you're more likely as well to fall prey to addictive behavior because you're doing addictive behavior or addictive substances because you're trying desperately to raise your dopamine. I don't have a tendency for low dopamine, but I have a tendency for hyperlactin, and hyperlactin opposes dopamine. So it's kind of similar. It's similar. It's more similar than different, but it's slightly different. But yeah, I can relate to, like constantly doing substances or activities that try and raise the dopamine just to feel normal. And I don't know if you can relate to that at all.
Yeah, and I think the low mood and the low dopamine, they go hand in hand. And then when
To
you
me,
get given a
100%.
phone, when you get given a phone, so I just see it with my son. I'm like, well, I think all kids, but that anything that raises the dopamine where you're just hooked on that. I've been getting into dopamine rebalancing. I don't want to say detox, but dopamine like rebalancing. So yeah, that is definitely something that I'm into, and I feel the difference when I.
Fantastic. Dopamine's a really difficult one to fix. I was just saying cardiovascular issues are quite easy as long as you're testing on top of them. But yeah, dopamine, because your body is always trying to return dopamine to a baseline so you don't spend too much energy. And then if your baseline is low through genetics, it's a rough one. It's not easy. So I applaud you for making real progress with that. That's can be quite challenging.
Yeah, I think the tyrosine, it said I needed tyrosine more, didn't it? So that's
It did.
something that I've been using.
Excellent. Have you ever tested to see if your tyrosine was low?
No, actually.
Good.
What test would you recommend? Blood test, would you?
With that one, you can do a blood test, but your body keeps the amino acids within a tight range in your blood. But with that one, actually, urine. I do a NutriVal every 6 or so months, and that tests, all the nutrients, basically your essential fats, every type of essential fat, including ones you may not have even heard of. The odd chain fatty acids, for instance. Tests all the amino acids, all the vitamins, except for it doesn't really test A and E, but it gives recommendations for them anyway, which is a bit odd. Most of the minerals, although not all, and then loads of other stuff, how your mitochondria is functioning, and all the rest of it. And it tests levels of heavy metals, including cadmium, mercury, lead, and all that. So I do that one commonly as like a complete one, and a few other people who have been on this podcast do. And we have found a very high correlation between if your genetics say that you need more of an amino acid, and then it shows up in the NutriVal that you are low in that amino acid. It's actually amazingly spooky because you'd think with the environment, like that it would not be as accurate as often as it is, and yet almost everyone who has low tyrosine in their genetics has low tyrosine in their test results.
I'm definitely going to look at that test. That'd be exciting.
Yeah, it's definitely a useful one to do. But tyrosine is one of those ones I'd also consider pretty harmless for most people, although you never know. So it's also one you can just take, and a lot of people, they take like capsules, 500 milligrams, and then they say it doesn't do anything. It's like, well, then take more, just even the average high protein diet might have 5 to 10 grams of tyrosine in it. So there's no harm in doing, like half a teaspoon of tyrosine and seeing if that actually makes a difference, in my opinion.
Okay, I'm going to try and I'm going to double up on that then.
Calcium you talked about, right? I think, or I don't know if that was before we started recording, but
Yeah, the bone ache that I always had growing up, just always felt that my bones was doing something that I was struggling. But yeah, now I have a lot of like sesame seeds and really high calcium foods that are not dairy, because I don't do great on dairy. So
let's look at that. You're interested in seeing that? Allergies and intolerances, which of them are genetic? Okay. This could be useful as well for people. There you go. Milk allergy, lactose intolerance. So hopefully that validates your experience again. So it's not good with the sugar and not good with the protein. So yeah, maybe only ghee or something might be okay. And so what else? Food allergies in general, oxalate sensitivity. I don't know if you've gone down the oxalate rabbit hole of...
but then I wouldn't eat anything, like there's eating disorders in this stuff and that. So I'm like, no, I'm not going down the eating disorder route.
I know what you mean by like half the foods have oxalates in, but I guess what I'd suggest to people this genetic is maybe just avoid the very highest oxalate foods as staples. And I often find people having it as staples. So basically the very highest things are like chocolate, tea, spinach, maybe you could argue beets. And so a lot, like even spinach, let's say, I know a lot of people have a very emotional relationship with chocolate, but even spinach, I'm amazed at the amount of people with oxalate sensitivity who have like spinach with every meal. And I'm like, just maybe don't do that because it's really not helping you. So yeah.
I recently heard that there's like high oxalates in chaga, and I've been really into chaga again. I'm like, no, I'm not I'm not going to stop with chaga. But yeah.
Well, this is again a thing that, there's this genetic tendency, but again, if you do a NutrEval test, it will tell you if you actually have signs of like that your body's struggling with oxalate. So again, where I'm a big believer in find out your tendencies, sure, because if you test everything you might have, it's going to cost, way too much money. But then when you've narrowed down like the things that, as you said, you don't want to avoid foods for no reason, because there's already a bunch of foods you're probably avoiding that you have to avoid, like dairy. But on the other hand, if it's really messing with your body, it would be good to know that that's the case. So that's where it's good to test it if you can.
Yeah, my kidneys are always my weakest point. So actually, that could be just that oxalate buildup.
It may be, yeah. Let's have a look at kidneys. See if there's another explanation. Yeah, not a huge amount of bad ones, but yeah, probably like the key ones. More likely to have CKD, more likely to have kidney stones. So yeah, with that genetic tendency for kidney stones as well, and then the tendency to not be able to handle oxalates well, I would definitely be hesitant about having again, not avoiding everything with any oxalate in, but just like not having loads of high oxalate things all the time would be probably recommended. And then, maybe things as well that break up the stones, whether it's like sodium citrate or potassium citrate, something like that. That's pretty effective. Yeah. Potentially. And then, kidney health. Again, though, this is a genetic tendency that hopefully won't manifest. It only generally manifests if, from my perspective, if the body's overloaded with toxicity for too long and the kidneys are taking too much of the brunt of it. So as long as you're on top of that toxin issue that we talked about earlier, I think you could modify that to normal risk. But it's worth testing, like testing cystatin C, or if that's not available, just the EGFR, like periodically, if you have this genetic. Again, super cheap test. Your NHS doctor will do it for you. It's just an extremely standard test. And a lot of people criticize those kind of tests, or like liver enzyme tests, because they say it's not sensitive enough. And it's true. You may still have an issue with your kidneys or liver and it won't show up on those tests. But it's more that you want to do those tests occasionally, because if they do see a problem, then there really is something that you need to address. So it's more just especially if you have a genetic tendency, it's more just do it just to be on top of it and make sure that...
Safeguarding, definitely.
Yeah. much easier to prevent it. If it's just a little bit, the liver enzymes are just a little bit over the range or whatever, it's not the end of the world. You can easily fix it and bring it back down by the next time you test. But it's good to know when it's a little bit over rather than when it's way, way, way over.
Yeah, makes sense. So we've gone through a lot, haven't we?
We've gone through a lot, and I hope. So let me ask you, first of all, do you see how going through category by category is less overwhelming than trying to do them all at once?
Yeah, and it's really helpful for me, I obviously know myself, so I know oh yes, that's definitely right. But there was a few, I think, weight gain. There was one other person that I did it with that it said a lot of weight gain, and she didn't have any weight gain. But I suppose that's if you're not on the right path of what she was doing. She was probably doing a lot of the right things anyway.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is a tricky thing about this, which is there are only genetic tendencies. And so in that case, and I've had this challenge a lot because I've worked with a lot of people like yourself, you've been very open and transparent, but I've worked with a lot of people who are health influencers, health teachers, famous people that you've probably heard of in this space. And, a few of them shared it publicly, but most of them haven't, which is fine. And the challenge is a lot of the time, you just said, I've been doing this for 20 years, I've been doing that for 20 years. When people have been really committed to their health a long time, especially if it's from a reasonably young age, which it would have been in your case, they often don't manifest a lot of the things that they even have a high risk for. And so the reports seem less accurate the more healthy the lifestyle a person has had for the long time. And that's why I always point out the other element of the report. So all we've done is a high overview. We haven't even looked inside any of the reports, right? But when you look inside the reports, which I would encourage you to encourage your clients to do, even if you don't have time to do it yourself because you're just doing the overview, you see the majority of the report is recommendations. And so if you have a client like that that's maybe a bit skeptical because it's saying something about them that's not the case, I would look at the recommendations with them. So let's say they have a really high risk of something, they just don't have it. Now, if it's like osteoporosis and they're 30, then it's just a case of, most people don't have that by the time they're 30. A few do, but most don't. So that's the reason why. But like you just said, there's plenty of 30-year-olds or however old this person was who have obesity. So that's not the reason. So in that case, what I do is I look at the recommendations with them, especially top recommendations. And I say, are you doing this one? Are you doing this one? Are you doing this one? And what you'll find, in my experience anyway, is that if they have a high risk of something, but they don't have it, and it is a common problem, it's pretty much always because they're already doing a bunch of the recommendations. So even though you've only just given them the recommendations, they've already been doing it a long time. So that is how they've managed to avoid having that problem. And then you can just give them credit. You can say, look, for some people being thin is effortless. For you, it is more of a challenge, but it's a challenge that you've mastered. So well done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. There's definitely that taken into account. What about histamine? Is there a whole section? Oh, there's allergies, isn't it? The histamine one.
Yeah, I don't think histamine intolerance came up for you, or a low level of the DAO enzyme. So obviously a person can still have issues of histamine if they have an issue of methylation, because methylation is one of the ways that your body breaks down histamine, but you don't have a tendency to specifically have high levels of histamine or low DAO enzyme in general, but of course you could still have them as a result of your body not being able to break it down if your detoxification is generally struggling.
Yeah, and the food allergies like the coffee and the oxalate, chocolate. Mm-hmm. Something that I've noticed that I don't do well if I have a lot of chocolate. Which could be one of those two things.
Yeah, me too, unfortunately. It can be oxalate. It can also, because it's full of heavy metals, it's one of the most, especially cadmium. Yeah, absolutely. It can be because it's an adrenal stimulant. So if your adrenals are already struggling, and it can be because it's really high in copper. And some people, you're a fan of Dr. Smith, you've probably heard him talk about that, So there's loads of things that coffee can potentially be a problem for, unfortunately. Sorry, chocolate. Well, yeah, and coffee, but yeah, sorry, chocolate. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't do coffee. But yeah, it's super in depth. And it was really helpful you going through these things with me.
Absolutely. And I hope it helps people, especially practitioners watching as well, to see. And thank you so much for sharing your own, results. I know it's a little bit like exposing your diary or something, like your inner self. I've done it. Obviously, I wouldn't dream of asking you to do it if I wasn't willing to do it. But I appreciate your courage in sharing it.
No, yeah, I'm happy to share, because goes to show that if you live right, then you don't have to suffer. But then saying that could be this silent cardiovascular thing that I don't really know.
I doubt it, to be honest. I think it's worth you testing, because I think a lot of the time people have it in the back of their mind, I might have this thing. And there's this ostrich psychology, which I think we all have, which is really hard to overcome, which is like, I'd rather not know. And it's not totally wrong, because the placebo effect is real. And so it is true. And I think this is what a lot of people are afraid of. Like, if a doctor tells you, you have this serious disease, there's loads of anecdotal stories and studies that show then a person's health often goes downhill. So that's the real fear about getting results, which I realize is valid. But on the other hand, to me, knowledge is power, and knowledge is the ability to change your situation. And so if you can take it as a jumping off point for improvement, as opposed to a death sentence, which is obviously how I view it and how I strongly encourage clients to view it, then it's a good thing. It's empowering, right? It's giving your body the ability the ability to shift your body. So I think, as you said, because you've been doing generally healthy stuff for a very long time, I'd be very surprised if your homocysteine is very high. But also, even if it was a bit high or quite high, I would be surprised if it took much to get it back down again. It might just be your low in folate, as you mentioned earlier, or something like that. And so, yeah. Generally, people who have a very healthy lifestyle, trying to think of there's exceptions, people who have a very healthy lifestyle who are consistent with it, I'd say there's probably less than 5% of them who really struggle anyway, with severe health issues. And I often see those people. But the vast majority of people, even if they have quite challenging genetics like you or I do, if they just do most of the right stuff most of the time, they're better off than the average. By the time you're 40, you're better off than the average 40-year-old. And you're probably finding that now. I don't know if you've ended up being healthier than your sister after all these years.
Yeah, it's taken a toll on her, because she's just been like, yeah, do whatever I want. And then like, oh, it's got enough for me, perimenopause. So, yeah.
So yeah, we got there eventually. We had the last laugh when.
What I find really interesting is that my granddad is 94, and he's like sat in this mouldy home for the last 10 years, and he's still going, and we're just like astounded by it. So I really want to look at his genetics and see if there's much variation with mine, because I haven't seen him eat a vegetable in years, and it's just like.
Well, the vegetables thing, he may be that type, right? I mean, I do believe in the Korean body types. I don't believe in anything, but I see a lot of credibility in it. And they talk about a specific type that just basically does well with animal foods and root vegetables. And you just see it in some people, they just do really well with that. And then you see other people who do really fantastic with greens and lean fish and stuff like that. So, there's just different types. In terms of the mold thing, that's a great example of genetics, right? You can have mother, father, son, daughter in a house. One of them is desperately sick. Everyone else is totally fine. And you'd never think mold, because you'd think, if it were mold, everyone would be sick to some degree. But there's that HLA gene, which you do have, which about 1 in 4 people have, that when you have that, you get really sick, and people who don't have it don't. And so, again, just really useful information to know.
Yeah, it would be.
Okay, well, like I said, thank you so much, Hayley, for being willing to share your genetic information, and for helping me with these great questions, and sharing stuff. If people want to find out more about you, especially if in the UK, right? You're a licensed nutritional therapist in the UK who can help people to go through this with them, as well as go through other test results. And you have your own interesting testing thing that we'll talk about, as I said, maybe another time in a future episode, which if I was still in the UK, I would be interested in trying myself. So if people are interested in finding out more about you or reaching out to you, what should they do?
I'm on Instagram, Hayley McAlinden. My website's hayleymacalinden.com. But I'm in the Bristol Bath area for in-person stuff with the Illegal scan, which we can talk about another time. But otherwise, I do online stuff similar to you. But so I'll be doing more of this DNA stuff, and doing the testing that correlates to it, maybe I'll be sharing my homocysteine and stuff as well. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Do you want to spell out HayleyMcAlinden.com?
Yeah, so Hayley, Hayley, and McAlinden, McAlinden.com.
Awesome. We'll put it in the description, but I find a lot of people just don't look. they ask. So, and some people, of course, are listening, not watching. So HayleyMcAlinden.com. Thank you so much, and maybe we'll see you in a future episode.
Thank you so much, Elwin. Speak to you soon. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed that, I recommend watching our latest episode, which you can do by clicking above. And make sure to subscribe, like the video, comment, and share with anyone who you think might appreciate it. Thank you.